want to jump in on just a couple of things. I mean, the fluoride thing I think is still debatable, but something else you said earlier that I think was important, and I wanted to swing back to. The reason why I asked about COVID, because I think I share this with you, and I don't necessarily think it's the lies per se. I think it's the smugness so that you're speaking to, and I agree with you if that is what you're speaking to. Like also in the early on in the pandemic, for example, the some of the science incorrectly, or some of the interpretation of the science incorrectly concluded we had to like wash our vegetables. You remember that? And they went back on that, but nobody felt like we were being bamboozled. It wasn't like a big deal. I think the game changed when Fauci was saying things like, first he said you didn't need to wear masks, then he said you do need to wear masks. When he was questioned about it, he said, well, I was afraid if I said that you had to wear masks, there'd be a run on masks, we wouldn't have them for frontline workers. Or he kept changing the percentage of people who need to get vaccinated for immunity, right? And he later on said he was afraid of doing too high of a number because people wouldn't feel like we'd be able to achieve it. I also have him on video in 2021 telling, this is when they were afraid that the black community wouldn't take the vaccine. He had a PBS film crew film him through this black community where he was telling people you won't have any symptoms if you get vaccinated, right? And we know people got vaccinated, got COVID, got symptoms. So I think it's not necessarily you get things wrong, like the washing the vegetables. I think it was the smugness that it was said, if you question Anthony Fauci, you're questioning the science. But this is why I want to go back and to something you said earlier. You said, the science was wrong. I don't necessarily think the science or scientists were wrong. I think the people in government who were interpreting the science didn't understand what they were interpreting. And I think they did it with a smug attitude. And when there were sometimes, inconsistencies or inaccuracies, the public was like, how dare you tell me what to do when you don't know what you're doing? So I don't know, is it really a rejection of science, or is it these kind of governmental officials?
I think it's. I think a lot in both columns, Nolan. I will say that I think they very much overestimated, in part based on modeling out of the UK. I think what the actual infection rate was, to say that it was way worse than the flu. And if you look at the CDC statistics, it's not. And so the science was based on modeling was wrong. And then I think what you said about, Anthony Fauci changing the thing about masks and then the 6 foot social distancing only made it worse. It's like, and I think the thing that I was starting to get to me and a lot of people, and I still feel like we have never had a reconciling of what happened to make sure it's not going to happen again. We're said it's over, don't worry about it. But if we were to have another outbreak of something, how sure are you, Nolan, that it would be handled better, and we wouldn't see that same smugness now with different characters because we've moved on with different people in those positions. But I think that's part of what the challenge is. When we raised questions, we were told we were anti-science. We were told we're bad people, that we want to kill grandma, that all of those things. And we've never really had public conversations about how does the law need to be changed to prevent this from happening again, and how can we make sure that we do protect the vulnerable without causing all these unneeded catastrophic consequences for both children, adults, and then also our economy, because the amount of money we printed during COVID certainly devalued the dollar and led to a lot of the inflation issues that we face as Americans today.
Yeah, and that's I think what you said there is really powerful, and I think there's a lot of people in your shoes who otherwise would have supported the Democratic Party, otherwise been supportive of the scientific community and education community, but they do feel like they've been abused and ignored, as you just described there, and lied to. And I also think, you mentioned this earlier about small businesses closing. A lot of other countries were able to pull together their tax dollars to keep people afloat, pay their rent, pay their wages while there was a shutdown. And that's really, if the modeling said, if you actually did a real shutdown, like 2 to 3 weeks, then you could kill the curve. We didn't do that. We still allowed some international travel. We allowed frontline workers. So when people say the shutdown did or didn't work, I say we never really did the shutdown. We kind of half did a shutdown, which is why it could never really succeed in that. But I think the point you're making about the ways in which people needed money during the pandemic, and they're being told by the party like, oh, you're just anti-science, we have to shut down. I don't think any of that stuff played well. So I think your book is a fascinating look at people's journey through a very critical time period.